Hello and welcome to Clickbait. I'm Matt and today we're talking about another classic camera. This time we're going down the Rollei road. This is a Rollei 35 LED. Now Rollei, if you're not familiar with them, were one of the big old grand dames of the classic film world. I always think of them as not quite up there with Leica and Hasselblad, but certainly not far behind. A Jaguar to a Rolls Royce, if you will. They are very, very high quality cameras, at least they certainly were when they still made them. And they were pretty expensive. I always tended to think of them as the 6x6 TLR, the big tall cameras you stand and look down into. But ever since the 1960s, they had a range of very compact, very high quality 35mm cameras. Now it's quite a wide-ranging collection of cameras that went on for a long time with lots of different varieties. They started off being made in West Germany, which really does date it to being West Germany, not just Germany. And later on though, they cheapened them a little bit, being made in Singapore. This model, the LED, came out in 1978 and it is one of the Singapore-made cameras. And although I say cheapened, it is still a metal body with a glass lens and it's all very mechanical and very solid feeling. It's a really nice little machine. Now this is quite a quirky little camera. It's all mechanical, obviously, and all manual, obviously. It's the 1970s after all, and it was an expensive camera. It's very little, not a lot of room to hide stuff. This is in fact about the same size in terms of depth and height as my little Sony ZV-1 vlogging camera, but not quite as wide left to right. So that gives you an idea of modern cameras for scale. But it is, as I say, fully manual, and when it's folded down completely, you can just about squeeze it into a bigger pocket. However, to use it, you have to be prepared to do a bit of manual labour. The lens here, this has got your controls on the front of it. The more expensive German-made ones, you can tell they are the more expensive ones because they've got big dials on the front. This one, though, it hasn't. But to use it, you have to pull the lens out and then twist it very gently but very firmly until it's locked into place. Then you can use it. And one of the many idiosyncrasies of this camera is that you must never pull and turn the lens unless the camera's wound on. Because if you try that with the camera not wound on, it will jam up completely. I've just been photobombed by a boat. But once you've got this thing extended, you can now see all three controls. Your shutter speed is on the body of the camera. Your aperture, which was hidden by the shutter speed ring when it's compressed. Gotta get wet feet now. Your aperture ring, which was hidden by the shutter speed, is behind that, and at the front is your focusing ring. All very good, all very great, except of course this is a basic viewfinder. It's not a linked viewfinder, so you have to do a little bit of guesswork when it comes to your focusing. Unlike cameras like the Olympus XA series, which have just got zone focusing for close, middle and far away, you do actually have a gauge, a range from 3 feet, which is 0.9 meters, up to infinity, or finishes measuring 6 meters or 20 feet. And so you have to be pretty good with your estimations and your guesstimates just there. And you might be wondering what the LED stands for in the name of this particular one, and that stands for the 3 LEDs in the viewfinder. There's a green one in the middle, which means spot on, and there's a red one above and a red one below, which means you got it too bright or got it too dark. However, with this particular one, even though the batteries, which don't actually exist anymore for this camera, I did make work briefly by using slightly smaller modern batteries and then stacking them on top of each other and then putting a bit of cardboard around them to hold them in the right place. Did get it working. The wiring is a little bit mangled, and yes, I have had this camera serviced because I did get the lens stuck. This particular camera actually came from like a curio junk shop type place where it had been on the shelf for a little while, and I think a few people had a go at playing with it. And although it was still working when I got it, I ran one film through it, and towards the end of it, it got stuck with the lens half in, half out, which was not ideal. I'm guessing it's probably my own fault for forgetting to wind it on before I turned anything. It's one of the few cameras you leave wound on all the time. Now that battery hole is another curio because it's right smack dab top dead center of the camera where you'd expect the hot shoe to be, and next to it is actually a little dial for setting your ISO for the light meters purposes, and your shutter is next to it, and because you leave it wound on all the time, there's a lock so you can't inadvertently trigger the shutter, and your frame counter is next to that. Apart from the fact your battery cover is in the place of your hot shoe, most of the top plate is fairly normal. Underneath though, it gets less normal because you've got a couple of big controls. Your film rewind handle is on the bottom, along with the button to push to release the rewind, which you have to push the whole time, I've found. Secondly, you've got your tripod screw mount in the bottom, normal place for it, but that's surrounded by the thing for opening the back of the camera to get film in it. And finally, there's the hot shoe for your flash, which sits underneath the camera. So if you want to run a flash on it, you've got to string it underneath and then shoot the camera upside down, which is a little bit weird. I'm told the only reason for this is purely because they just ran out of room on top, but surely the battery would be better on the bottom and hot shoe on top. I don't know. I don't design cameras for a living. And that brings us on to our next idiosyncrasy. I mentioned your thing for opening the back of the camera was on the bottom, and it is. It's a big twirly thing which you twirl, and that opens the back. But it doesn't just open the back, the entire bottom and back of the camera slides off, a bit like a 1930s Leica or similar. And this case, which feels just like thin pressed tin to be perfectly honest, slides off and gives you, well, the bottom of an old 1930s Leica style way of loading a film. So the cassette film goes on the right hand side, the wrong side really, when you think about it. You have to undo this little flap, which then closes back over the film and holds it nice and tight against the sensor area, I guess you want to call it. And it wraps into your left-hand side spindle where you can use that. And once it's open, you can actually see the little bit of mechanism that causes the problem and the reason why you can't wind the lens in and out when it's closed, because you can see a bit of the cocking mechanism actually extends into where the hole tracks into and out of. So it kind of makes sense in a way, but it's just a little bit vulnerable and a little bit weird. This might be my most photobombed ever episode of anything I've ever filmed on the internet. So far I've got a boat, a dog, and now a swan. I'm being a little cautious because apparently they can break a man's arm. Now, I know that's not true. So what's this thing actually like in use? Well, it's okay kind of once you get the hang of it. It is a little bit fiddly. Like anything from the 1970s, which is fully manual, and you're used to more automatic modern stuff, it's a bit of a faff. And everything from loading the camera to focusing it is a little bit hard work, but it is quite rewarding nonetheless. So once you've got the camera loaded up and you're ready to shoot, if this was a working LED, I would just focus up there and then use my shutter speed and aperture to figure out what the exposure is going to be. I haven't got that luxury, so I'm using a phone as a light meter at the moment. We've got the choice of a shutter speed from maximum 500th of a second down to 1/30th of a second plus bulb. Now, this doesn't seem like a lot, but this is 1978, so don't forget there is a limitation to what could be done with mechanical technology in such a small case. And it is mechanical. You can actually hear the clockwork. As I wind this shutter up and down, you can actually hear the mechanism doing things, possibly. Maybe you can't. I can hear though. And the aperture, which is obviously revealed once you've extended the lens, goes down to f/22 and up to f/3.5, which is pretty sharp. I mean, f/2.8 is the golden number, but 3.5 on a lens this tiny on a camera this small is actually pretty impressive. And this lens is extremely sharp. The problem is getting it to position where it can be sharp. I took it for a walk around with a roll of Lucky SHD 100 this week, and just to see what it could do. And it is, well, a little bit of guesswork and certainly a bit of the old f8 and B there. Because rather than opening up to f3.5 and trying to get things pin sharp, which I have tried with this camera once before, and reader, let me tell you, it failed miserably, I decided setting somewhere in the middle on the aperture and then just kind of focusing as close as I could was going to be the way forward. And for the most part, that did actually kind of work quite well. And then the lens could actually shine and do its thing because it does render really good detail. Now, Lucky SHD isn't the finest, sharpest film out there, but with a new camera, you never really know what it's going to be. You don't really want to bung a 20-pound roll of cine still through it. You want something that's £4 and hope for the best. But it did show the camera's got potential. And because the viewfinder isn't too far off the line of the lens itself, the parallax isn't too bad, so you can frame things fairly accurately. So if you want to try and get a wide framed shot with people walking through an archway like this one, for example, it does work out relatively well. The only limitation really that I've found again and again with this camera is, of course, you're guessing on the focus, and that does limit where you can use your f3.5. Because so often, if you're that tight on, that shallow on your depth of field, it does make it a little bit tricky. Now, these are a bit of a collector's piece because they are known to be high quality cameras, high quality metal bodies, high quality sonar glass lenses, all the rest of it. Even the ones that are made in Singapore like this one are known to be collectible, and so the price range on these things really is all over the place. I paid 40 quid for this particular one, but then I had to pay another £40 to have it serviced after I got it stuck. But certainly it benefited from being opened and cleaned anyway, so I probably would have done that at some point anyway. But the prices do vary from a few quid on eBay up to several hundred with a collector shop. And there are people out there who will make a thing like Pokemon. They'll try and get every single one. You've got to catch them all. So should you rush out and buy yourself a Rollei 35, LED or otherwise, well, if you like interesting and slightly different cameras that are slightly unusual to use, add a little bit of challenge but do reward for it when you get it right, then yes, this is potentially a camera for you. Is this going to be the camera that I leave in my everyday carry bag and things? Probably not. To be perfectly honest, I do prefer the simplicity of the Olympus XA, which gives relatively similar results in terms of lens quality, and it's just a little bit easier to use. But it is a fun and interesting camera to try, and it's certainly something that some days I'm going to want to take out, and because it gives you that ultimate control, because you have full menu control with aperture and shutter control, you can set this up to be really precise. If you want long, dragging, slow exposures or fast action capturing shots, you can do that with this camera, which you can't do with things like the XA, so it has its place. Just for everyday use, it might be a little bit fragile, and certainly it can be a little bit slow. So what you do tend to find, especially if you're doing street photography, I was mostly on a 60th or 125th of a second and f8 for most of the pictures I took on this particular roller film, and then just focusing roughly where I needed to be and grabbing them. And that's probably the way forward with this camera for most of the pictures I would take with it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this look at this unusual, different little camera, and maybe inspired you to go check out eBay or Marketplace, see if you can turn up something like this as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this, like and of course subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.